Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, at least 2 people are dead and dozens injured after a car plows into a crowd at a Christmas market in Germany. Local emergency services are calling the tragic incident an attack. What we know about the suspected driver and what authorities are saying about the attack, which took place about 100 miles west of Berlin. The suspect in the United Healthcare CEO murder case enters the same federal prison where 2 other high-profile inmates are held. Chris Beers has an update on Luigi Mangione's court appearance yesterday and the possibility he'll face the death penalty. Just hours from a midnight government shutdown, the House passes a stopgap measure to temporarily fund federal operations and disaster aid, but the bill doesn't include President-elect Trump's demands for a debt limit increase. Averts joins us in studio to discuss. President Biden says he's canceling more student loan debt for 55,000 public service workers. The Department of Education says this brings the total amount canceled under Biden to $180 billion. Jason Blair reports.
This is NTD Evening News. Live from our global headquarters in New York City, here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. A tragedy in Germany. A driver plowed into a group of shoppers at a Christmas market in Magdeburg, about 100 miles west of Berlin. Authorities say at least 2 people were killed, including a toddler. Police have arrested a suspect. NTD's David Lamb reports.
Germany police arrested a suspect after a car plowed into a crowd of people in the eastern German city of Magdeburg today. At least 2 people have died and over 60 injured. A local official says the suspected driver is a doctor from Saudi Arabia who was acting alone and has lived in Germany since 2006. Local police suspect it was a deliberate attack. Magdeburg, with a population of about 250,000, lies about 100 miles from the German capital Berlin. Back in 2016, an Islamic extremist drove through a crowd of Christmas market goers in Berlin in a truck. The terrorist was killed days later in a shootout in Italy. European leaders have sent their condolences after this latest attack, and German Chancellor Olaf Scholz will travel to Magdeburg tomorrow. David Lamb, NTD News.
Luigi Mangione, the suspect in the United Healthcare CEO murder case, slept in a federal prison in Brooklyn last night. One of the federal charges he faces could lead to the death penalty. NTD's Chris Beers visited the Metropolitan Detention Center this afternoon.
Right behind me is the Brooklyn Federal Prison where, as we speak, Luigi Mangione is located. Also in that prison is Sean Diddy Combs and Sam Bankman-Fried, 3 very high-profile inmates here. There are about 1,200 inmates in total, many of them awaiting federal trials in Manhattan or Brooklyn. Luigi Mangione went into a federal courthouse in Manhattan yesterday wearing civilian clothing. He had a dark zipper-up sweater with a white shirt underneath, tan khaki pants, and orange prison shoes. He mostly sat calmly between his 2 attorneys with his hands in his lap and with his ankles shackled together. Mangione now faces 4 criminal charges. That's after waiving extradition in Pennsylvania. Those charges include murder through use of a firearm, 2 stalking charges, and a firearm offense. The federal murder charge could lead to him getting the death penalty, something that is actually illegal in New York State, so he won't see that kind of penalty in the state case. Acting U.S. Attorney Edward Kim describes Mangione's alleged actions as a grossly misguided attempt to broadcast Mangione's views across the country. But this wasn't a debate, it was murder, and Mangione now faces federal charges, unquote. FBI Assistant Director James E. Dennehy said Luigi Mangione Mangione allegedly conducted the carefully premeditated and targeted execution of Brian Thompson to incite national debates, he says. The alleged plot demonstrates a cavalier attitude toward humanity, deeming murder an appropriate recourse to satiate personal grievances, unquote. Here's former FBI agent Peter Licata on the federal criminal complaint.
So the way the criminal complaint, about a 10-page federal criminal complaint, was written was it outlines and details basically his notebook, which is the stalking, the intent. So we always talk about motive, opportunity, means. All three of those elements are addressed and captured in the criminal complaint as well as his notebook, and they seem to match up.
You heard Licata mentioning just now Mangione's notebook. The federal complaint, unsealed on Wednesday, alleges a notebook found in Mangione says, quote, the target is insurance because it checks every box. It also allegedly says the investor conference is a true windfall, and most importantly, the message becomes self-evident, unquote. Mangione's next court date is a preliminary hearing on January 18th. Chris Beers, NTD News.
And we have some breaking news just moments ago. The House tonight passing a funding plan to avert a government shutdown right before its midnight deadline. The proposal contains $30 billion in farm aid, along with $110 billion in emergency hurricane relief funding, among many others. It's a temporary plan that'll keep the government open until March 14th of next year. But what's not included in the bill is a debt ceiling increase, which President-elect Trump has been advocating for. Worth noting, the bill went to the House floor through a method known as suspension. That means it requires 2/3 of the votes to pass. Tonight's decision marks a cap for the year after the House tried to agree on its previous funding proposals without success. And joining us now live in studios, NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao. Good evening, Iris. What is the latest on negotiations, and what's the president-elect been saying about all of this?
So sure, the latest updates we've now gotten is that the bill is on track to passing. Of course, this will avert a government shutdown, which would have happened if this bill did not pass by midnight today. And just now, actually, from the White House, President Biden already voicing support for this bill's passage and saying that it will keep the government open. Korean Jean-Pierre and the White House press secretary saying in the latest statement tonight that, quote, while it does not include everything we sought, it includes disaster relief that the president requested for the communities recovering from the storm, eliminates the accelerated pathway to a tax cut for billionaires, and would ensure that the government can continue to operate at full capacity. And that is somewhat in line with what Speaker Johnson was saying earlier today, that while it does not include a measure to modify or even eliminate the debt ceiling, it does keep the government open and would fund farmers and pay hurricane victims. Here's what Johnson was saying earlier today. Watch.
There is a unanimous agreement in the room that we need to move forward. We will not have a government shutdown, and we will meet our obligations for our farmers who need aid, for the disaster victims all over the country, and for making sure that military and essential services and everyone who relies upon the federal government for a paycheck is paid over the holidays.
And Elon Musk, who actually played a big role in tanking the original bipartisan funding bill that did not include any measure related to the debt ceiling, originally came out kind of questioning this latest version of the bill today, asking if it's a Republican bill or a Democrat bill, as it does not include Trump's demand for postponing or suspending the debt ceiling. But later he said about the newer version that, quote, the speaker did a good job here given the circumstances. It went from a bill that weighed pounds to a bill that weighed ounces. Balls should now be in the Dem court. We know that the latest version of the bill that just got passed in the House is much shorter than the original one that Trump and Musk helped tank. And actually, President-elect Trump, while he has not again commented on the latest development tonight, is still actually calling for some measure when it comes to the debt ceiling. Actually, on this morning, early Friday morning, Trump again calling for Congress to either extend it beyond 2029 or just get rid of the debt ceiling once and for all, adding that without this, we should never make a deal. While now the circumstances, of course, different than what originally what Trump has demanded. For example, throughout yesterday, the bill that actually did not get passed despite Trump's support. And Trump added actually later this morning that if there has to be a government shutdown, he wants it to begin while President Biden is in office, not after January 20th. So we are seeing, of course, both President Biden out voicing his support for this new CR bill, but while President-elect Trump, of course, not having his demand immediately met in this latest passage of the more simplified version of the funding bill. And right now we are, of course, waiting for a response from President-elect Trump on what he thinks about the latest development here. Meanwhile, earlier today, before the White House going now to actually supporting this new bill, has actually blamed Republicans for the prospect of a government shutdown. Kareem Jean-Pierre earlier today at the press conference said this. Let's take a look.
Republican needs to stop playing politics with a government shutdown. And they are doing the bidding. They're doing the bidding of their billionaire friends. That's what we're seeing, at the expense of hardworking Americans.
And when pressed about why President Biden had not spoken to the public when there is a prospect of government shutdown for the past few days, the press secretary says that President Biden has seen all this happening over the years. He knows how Congress works, adding that President Biden has actually been involved in the negotiation process, and by today talking to top Democrats in Congress, including Senator Chuck Schumer and top Democrat on the House side, Hakeem Jeffries, about the latest negotiations. Back to you.
All right, Iris, thanks for those updates. President Biden says his administration is canceling additional student debt totaling over $4 billion. The move will affect 55,000 individuals. NTD's Jason Blair has the update.
President Joe Biden announces the cancellation of $4.28 billion in student debt for 55,000 public service workers.
The people approved for debts cancellation today include teachers, nurses, service members, law enforcement officials, and other public service workers.
Biden said in the announcement these service workers have dedicated their lives to giving back to their communities and who are finally earning the relief they are entitled to under the law. Biden says his administration has canceled student debt for almost 5 million people with this latest action. The U.S. Department of Education says in an announcement that the Biden administration has forgiven an approximate $1.8 billion in student loans. The department says $78 billion of that was through the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, or PSLF. The department credits these numbers to the Biden-Harris administration's changes to this program. The PSLF program was established in 2007 under President George W. Bush. It grants loan forgiveness for people who work in public service and have made monthly payments for 10 years. Reporting from the White House, Jason Blair, NTD News.
The largest party supply store in the country is shutting down all of its stores after nearly 40 years in business. Friday, Party City's corporate employees were told this will be their last day of employment. The company's CEO said Party City will be winding down operations immediately. He pointed to the company's financial challenges as the reason for its collapse. Party City filed for bankruptcy in January of last year. The plan canceled nearly $1 billion in debt, dissolved the company's stock, and kept a majority of its 800 stores open. But that wasn't enough. The chain still had more than $800 million in debt, and that strained earnings this year. And coming up, U.S. officials visit Syria for the first time in over a decade, meeting with the country's new leaders. Meanwhile, residents in Syria continue to celebrate and express hope for the country's future. Jason Perry has the latest. Russia today targeting Kyiv with different types of hypersonic and ballistic missiles. Arian Pastar reports on the impact the attack had on Ukraine's capital. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's administration in turmoil as a potential election looms on the horizon. We have more on his latest moves with cabinet members. And Britain appoints a new ambassador to the U.S. Malcolm Hudson explains what obstacles he might face when courting the Trump administration after the break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. U.S. officials have met with leaders in Syria for the first diplomatic visit to the country since 2012. This comes as Syrian residents express hope for the future of their country. NTD's Jason Perry has the update.
The celebrations continue in the streets of Syria daily, almost 2 weeks after the former government fell.
Thank God we are here to celebrate the victory that we have been waiting for 14 years or 12 years, a joy that we cannot express. We want Syria free, we want Syria for all religions, for all sects.
And this is something the U.S. is pushing for as well. On Friday, U.S. diplomats were expected to meet with Syria's new leaders and also seek information on the whereabouts of missing American journalist Austin Tice. The team is also the first group of American diplomats to formally visit Syria in more than a decade, since the U.S. closed its embassy in Damascus in 2012. They're expected to push for the protection of minorities and the rejection of terrorism and chemical weapons, something the Biden administration says will be critical for any U.S. support for a new government. Meanwhile, U.S. troops continue to operate on the ground in Syria, fighting the Islamic State terrorist group also known as ISIS. Pentagon spokesperson General Pat Ryder said they've more than doubled the number of U.S. troops there, from about 900 to around 2,000.
These additional forces are considered temporary rotational forces that deploy to meet shifting mission requirements, whereas the core 900 deployers are on longer-term deployments.
U.S. forces recently reported killing the leader of ISIS, Abu Yusuf, in a precision airstrike in Syria. U.S. General Michael Kurilla said they won't allow ISIS to take advantage of the current situation in Syria and regroup. Jason Perry, NTD News.
Kyiv is dealing with the aftermath of a ballistic missile attack. Russia struck the Ukrainian capital during its rush hour this morning. Casualties have been reported and embassies damaged. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pazdar has the latest.
Parts of Kyiv are heavily damaged after a Russian missile attack on Friday morning. Russia reportedly used different hypersonic and ballistic missiles to strike Ukraine's capital. That's according to Ukrainian officials, who say at least one person is dead and a dozen more injured. Embassies have been damaged.
Several embassies were damaged. I brought some pictures to show you how it looks. Here's the interior of the embassy. All of these embassies are housed in the same building.
In total, the embassies of 6 countries have been damaged, among them nations such as Portugal and Argentina. A student in Kyiv says she was about to get into a taxi before the attack happened, but then decided against it.
As I approached the taxi, I canceled the ride in the last moment. Something has stopped me. Something saved me. God saved me.
The Russian Defense Ministry confirmed the strikes. It says Russia struck a command center used by Ukraine's intelligence agency to operate missiles. And Russia also reports casualties on Friday in its Kursk region after a Ukrainian attack. Officials did not specify the number of casualties, but they say Ukraine used American rockets for the attack. Also in Russia, authorities have now detained and charged the suspect in this week's killing of a senior general. Igor Kirillov was the chief of the military's nuclear forces in Russia. This video shows Kirillov and his assistant leaving their apartment building on Tuesday morning. That's when a bomb exploded, killing both of them. A Russian court now ordered the suspect to be detained until February. Arian Pazdar, NTD News.
Over in Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau reshuffled his cabinet today. This comes as a potential election is on the horizon. Trudeau appointed 8 new ministers and gave 4 existing ministers new roles. They cover areas from public safety to trade to veterans affairs. The shuffle comes as Trudeau's former close ally, Member of Parliament Chrystia Freeland, resigned as finance minister and deputy prime minister on Monday. Now Trudeau's own power is in question, as the new Democratic Party, or NDP, said today it would trigger a vote of no confidence and bring down the government. The NDP has backed Trudeau's minority government for years, but is now pulling its support and calling on Trudeau to resign. Parliament is now shut for the holidays. The NDP said it would trigger a vote of no confidence after lawmakers reconvene on January 27th. That means a new election could happen in the coming months. Britain's Prime Minister has appointed a new ambassador to the United States, a member of the House of Lords who has advocated for better China relations. This may well create obstacles for his courting of the Trump administration as he hopes to reach a trade deal between the U.S. and the U.K. NTD's international correspondent Malcolm Hudson has more for us from London.
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has named Lord Peter Mandelson as his next US ambassador, who is due to take up the role on the same day President-elect Trump is inaugurated. Now, Mandelson is a career politician, not a career diplomat, but he was the mastermind between the Labour Party's 1997 election success. He's ardently pro-Europe, has advocated for closer ties with China, and has in the past called Trump reckless and a danger to the world. Several British ministers have also strongly criticised Trump in the past, though it's understood that Trump will look at their behaviour now as the determining factor of a good relationship. The same can be expected of Mandelson, who has in recent times softened his language on Trump. However, Mandelson's pro-China advocacy will likely be a big obstacle as he courts the Trump administration. He spent 7 years as the president of the Great Britain China Centre, a government body for UK relations with China, and was the only Labour Party lord to vote against an amendment aimed at calling out alleged genocide in Xinjiang. Starmer on Thursday said the UK must make sure to avoid all tariffs Trump will impose. Here's where Mandelson's political expertise may come in handy. He's gained the moniker the Prince of Darkness for his ruthless political manoeuvring, and his past experience includes being the European Union's Trade Commissioner, experience likely to be an asset for securing a trade deal with the US. Dame Karen Pierce, the current ambassador of the US, will remain in the post until Trump is inaugurated on January 20th. Mandelson was picked for the diplomatic post despite Trump's suggestion that Reform Party leader Nigel Farage would be a, quote, good choice. Mandelson served in multiple ministerial roles as a Member of Parliament under Labour Prime Ministers Tony Blair and Gordon Brown before being made a Lord in 2008. He said it is a great honour to serve as Britain's next US ambassador. Malcolm Hudson, NTD News, London.
Coming up, mysterious drone sightings spark panic and concern in the U.S., and conflicts continue to rage in the Middle East. The Deputy National Security Advisor during the first Trump administration joins us to dive into the latest national security concerns after the break. Welcome back. If you're just joining us now, here are some of today's top headlines. At least 2 people were killed and 68 others injured when a car plowed into a busy Christmas market in eastern Germany in what appeared to be an attack. Authorities arrested the suspected driver of the car, a 50-year-old Saudi Arabian man who first came to Germany in 2006. The House voted overwhelmingly to pass a stopgap funding measure to avert a government shutdown. The new plan from House Speaker Mike Johnson dropped President-elect Trump's demand for a debt limit increase into the new year. The Biden administration announced an additional $4.2 billion in student debt relief for nearly 55,000 public service workers. It's part of the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, which is designed to erase loans after 10 years of service. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau reshuffled his cabinet as his political career is in jeopardy. A party that has backed his minority government is pulling support and said it will trigger a new election in the coming months. Mysterious drone sightings in the northeastern U.S. and conflicts in the Middle East. To discuss the latest national security concerns, I'm joined by Victoria Coates, Deputy National Security Advisor in the first Trump administration, Vice President of the Davis Institute for National Security and Foreign Policy, and author of Battle for the Jewish State. Victoria, thank you so much for joining us. Great to see you again. Now, to begin with all the mysterious drone sightings over New Jersey, the FAA is now banning drone flights over several cities above critical infrastructure. Is there a national security concern here, or how are you viewing this?
Well, and I'm coming to you from Philadelphia, so we're very close to this problem. And yes, there is, because the FAA actually said in their no-fly order that was issued yesterday, we're doing this because of national security concerns. Now, that's one of two things. There are either American citizens who are doing something illegal, in which case they should be arrested, or there are hostile foreign agents who are doing this, in which case we need to take action against them. But this is after almost a month in which we've been told by everyone from the Pentagon to the White House to the FAA that this was all fine. These were lawful fixed wings aircrafts. It wasn't anything new. Don't be all hysterical like Congressman Jeff Van Drew and suggest there might be an Iranian involvement here. Now all of a sudden there is. So I don't think we're getting the truth here.
And on that last part, given media coverage and a sense of panic or curiosity from some, there's been a reported 269% increase in lasers aimed at aircraft and drones in New Jersey, which is a violation of federal law and a safety hazard. Now, despite those repeated assurances from our government that there is no public safety threat behind these drones, why do you think so many people are unconvinced?
I think because, people trust their own eyes. We've all seen these things. And those of us who live in flight paths or are used to planes going overhead, you know what that's like. And this is different. And so I think if it is truly benign, I don't see why there's a problem telling us exactly what it is. And if it isn't, I think they're making the situation considerably worse by making it look like they have something to hide. I don't know what kind of mass hysteria they're concerned about triggering. But at this point, I mean, they're essentially having that same effect.
Now, shifting gears a bit, we have seen drones change the way warfare is conducted, whether that's in the Russia-Ukraine war, the Houthi attacks on commercial shipping in the Red Sea, or across the Middle East. It's often a cheaper way to cause damage against a better funded opponent like Israel or even the U.S. How do you view this aspect of modern warfare and where this could lead?
No, it is sort of a brave new world, and important to remember these are craft, I guess, for want of a better word, or objects that, yes, fly in the air, but they're also aquatic ones. You can have sea drones, so you can use them in place of manned sea vessels. And so, yes, it is a much lower cost way. And I think one of the things the United States and Israel are grappling with is the interceptors for all of our very precise, exquisite missile defense systems, be it Aegis, THAAD for the United States, Iron Dome, or David Sling for Israel. Those interceptors can cost well over $1 million, and the drone can cost $20,000. So the bad guys are learning that's math that really works for them. And so I think we've seen Elon Musk, for example, on Twitter say, why are we spending billions of dollars on F-35s when we should be spending that money on drones for, a higher reward for a lower cost? I think, that's probably a little bit tongue-in-cheek. The F-35 is an extraordinary aircraft that we wouldn't want to scrap. But at the same time, I think particularly going into this next budget season, with the kind of attention that we have on cost-cutting measures, that kind of reform is the sort of thing the Pentagon's going to have to look at.
Now, zooming in on the conflicts in the Middle East, there are still hostages being held in Gaza. The brother of an Israeli man held hostage by Hamas called out the United Nations Wednesday over its inaction, urging it to, quote, send a resonating message that terror will never prevail. Now, Israel and Hamas are once again close to a ceasefire deal, and one of the sticking points is regarding hostages. Now, in your view, what is the next step needed to get the hostages out?
Well, I think it may have to be the inauguration of President Trump. I was in Israel 2 weeks ago when he made his very, I think, clarifying statement on the hostages. I think if the UN Secretary General, the American president, had been saying that sort of thing 15 months ago, we might have had the hostages out by now. Instead, all you've gotten is equivocation, very timid, very tepid statements, demands for more aid for Gaza, that sort of thing. And so I think President Trump's clarity will be helpful, but Hamas knows there aren't going to be any ramifications until he's back in office. Now, he has said there will be, quote, hell to pay if Hamas doesn't let all of the hostages go, particularly the 4 living Americans we hope are still there, that they're waiting until Inauguration Day to release them because it doesn't cost them anything to wait until then.
And domestically, we saw rising levels of anti-Semitism here in America, especially prevalent at Ivy League University. You actually have a new book out, just came out, The Battle for the Jewish State. Talk to us about the cultural side of this, not just the military conflicts that we see on TV.
Now, this has been one of the most dramatic, I think, fallout from the October 7th terrorist attacks in Israel last year. And it's why I wrote The Battle for the Jewish State. The subtitle is How Israel and America Can Win, because I think we all have to realize this isn't just a battle for Israel. This isn't just a Jewish problem. This is now an American problem. And what we've seen since October 7th, as you said, are these extraordinary displays of support, not just for the Palestinian people, but specifically for Hamas on our most elite university campuses. And I'm an alum of the University of Pennsylvania, for example. When I went there to speak earlier this year, invited by the Free Speech Association, I required 3 levels of armed guards. The threats were so high because an alum wanted to come to campus and say free speech was good and hating Jews is bad. And that seemed like it was a call to violence. So this is a very real, entrenched problem. I think President Trump is taking a very hard look at the actions the federal government can do to support by cutting off funding for these institutions if they don't get after the problem, by having there be legal repercussions. There are also actions we could all take on the state and local level, also to hold funding at risk, and also by not sending our children to institutions that are overtly anti-Semitic and not paying those massive tuition bills. So that's a main point of the book. I appreciate you raising it because I think it is a bad problem for America, but one we can solve.
And of course, we saw the Abraham Accords under the first Trump administration. What do you think a second Trump term means for the region, especially in the aftermath of October 7th?
Well, I can tell you from my travel there earlier this month that there's great anticipation in the region, both from Israelis, but then also from our Gulf partners and allies, other regional allies, all really welcome back the strong voice that President Trump had, the reliable leadership. They understood where he stood. And that's what got us to the Abraham Accords. It wasn't through trying to mollify or appease the Muslim world. It was by standing unequivocally with Israel, by doing things like moving the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, recognizing the Golan Heights as sovereign Israeli territory. Thank heavens he did that now, given what's going on in Syria. But that gave the region clarity, and they got to the first peace deals in 25 years. So I think he will bring that same posture back to the White House, and if we're lucky, rather than more war and upheaval, which is what we've seen under President Biden, we'll have more peace deals after January 20th of 2025.
Victoria Coates, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And you better watch out, you better not cry. Holiday travel could be a bear this year if you're taking to the skies. As Laura Aguirre explains, a record air travel week may not be the only thing slowing your roll home for the holidays.
Pack your patience, please. It's going to be busy across the nation.
The TSA predicts another record travel week ahead.
Starting today through Sunday after Christmas, we will see probably our busiest time period since the pandemic.
If you're flying, you'll be squeezing through the nation's TSA lines with an estimated nearly 40 million other people in the coming days. And Mother Nature is coming along for the ride, starting with a dump of snow across parts of the Great Lakes and Northeast today that forced a temporary ground stop, then delay at Chicago's O'Hare Airport, causing a ripple effect at other hubs with over 3,700 delayed or canceled flights at one point today. Forecasters say this wintry mix of snow and rain could last into Saturday, which could cause delays no matter how you're heading out.
Most people drive to their holiday destinations. 107 million people are expected to take road trips.
Looking ahead, a new system of storms is rolling toward the West Coast, on target to deliver heavy rain from Seattle to San Francisco. Then that system tracks east, eventually delivering a round of wet, icky weather to portions of the Great Lakes and Northeast early next week.
The terminals are going to be very busy across the nation.
The best way to avoid a TSA delay?
In TSA.gov, you can simply type in what you want to bring, and it'll tell you, should I put it in my carry-on bag, should I put it in my check bag, or should I not bring it at all?
As always, be early, be prepared. I'm Laura Aguirre reporting.
How is screen time affecting your child's playtime? A Boston pediatrician is studying the effects of digital technology on the physical, mental, and social well-being of children. Hear about his findings on NTD's Capital Report with Steve Lance at 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. Coming up, the classical Chinese dance and music company Shen is kicking off its 2025 World Tour on Monday. How have ethnic Chinese audiences reacted to the performance's portrayal of Chinese culture and to the fact that the show is still banned in China? And in college football, it's Indiana versus Notre Dame tonight as the playoffs start with an in-state rivalry. Dave Martin joins us to discuss after the break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. The New York-based classical Chinese dance company Shen is kicking off its 2025 World Tour on Monday. For the past 19 years, Shen beautiful presentations of traditional Chinese art and culture have touched audiences across the globe. How have ethnic Chinese audiences reacted to the performances? Let's take a look.
All the choreography, the dancers' moves, everything was flawless. I felt like I had arrived in heaven. I saw their graceful postures and I felt like that's where I came from. I believe this is something that ordinary people cannot perform. This is definitely not just a performance. I even feel like the performers on stage are all heavenly beings and heavenly maidens. This music and dance can only come from the heavens.
I felt extremely excited, like every pore of my body was open and the blood sang in my veins.
I was awestruck right from the opening. Shen presents the true Chinese culture. It has the divinely transmitted culture, China's true culture in it.
I was so emotional. When I saw the first program, tears began falling from my eyes. I was so moved, so moved.
Chinese audiences expressed deep gratitude for the performance's preservation and revival of traditional Chinese culture.
Nowadays, China's traditional culture has been completely shattered, and you can hardly see things like this anymore. To be able to see Shen overseas, preserving the flame of Chinese culture, I feel truly grateful.
China's greatest calamity is actually the cultural destruction caused by the CCP's rule after its establishment. The spirit of the Chinese people has rotted in materialistic greed. In this situation, Shen pursuit of spiritual revival is in itself a cause to save humanity's soul.
Many in the audience expressed the same wish for Shen to one day perform in mainland China, where it is currently banned.
I have a special wish. I truly hope my family can see Shen Yun.
Shen preserves the flame of our Chinese culture, and we must have them perform worldwide. Especially one day in the future, they must perform in mainland China to revive our traditional culture and reignite our values of truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance on Chinese soil. I also hope the CCP officials and other party members will also give Shen a watch. This would be a form of salvation for the Chinese people, emotionally, spiritually, and on the level of faith. I'm really looking forward to seeing Shen in mainland China.
Shen Yun's 2025 global tour will begin on December 23rd, premiering in Atlanta, Georgia, and Nagoya, Japan.
And now for your sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, a lot going on today, but let's start in the NBA, where for the first time in their storied careers, Golden State Warriors teammates Steph Curry and Draymond Green were both held without a field goal in a blowout loss to Memphis. What happened?
I think we'd all like to know that. I mean, the Grizzlies beat them by more than 50 points last night, one of the worst losses they've ever had. Now, it's not completely uncommon for Draymond Green not to hit a shot in the game. I mean, he's more of a well-rounded defensive player, good rebounder, good passer. But Curry, he once made at least one three-pointer in every game for an NBA record 268 games. That's like more than 3+ seasons worth. Yesterday, though, he didn't hit a 3 or even a 2. Now, I guess a decline, though, of course, is inevitable at their ages. I mean, Curry is 36, Green is 34. And I think it's safe to say, the once dominant Warriors, they're not in their heyday anymore, clearly. I mean, they missed the playoffs last year. They did get off to a fast start this season, 12-3, but since then, they've not lost 9 out of 11. I will grant, though, it's still early in the season.
Elsewhere in the league, yesterday LeBron James passed Kareem Abdul-Jabbar for the most minutes played in NBA history.
Yeah, better than 57,000 minutes, and he's still going strong, really. I mean, he was a starter in the NBA right out of high school, too. The NBA doesn't even allow that high school to NBA jump anymore. You have to do at least 1 year in between college or whatever. But this is his 22nd season. Honestly, I'm still in shock at the numbers he was putting up. 22 points a game, 8 rebounds, plus his 9 assists a game are 4th in the league. This is from a guy who's 10 days away from turning 40 years old. Now, everyone, of course, compares him to Michael Jordan. It's an argument that's going to be never ending. But if you look at what they each did in their age 40 seasons, at least to this point anyway, you have to give the nod to LeBron. He averages more points, more rebounds, and assists. And look what happened this summer in the Olympics. Our team of all-stars really depended on him still, just like the Lakers do right now. So it's really pretty incredible what he's done.
Now, shifting gears to some lighter news, if you will, breakdancing. Previously, there had been a comedy show in Australia called Raygun the Musical that was canceled just hours before it was to start. That's after Raygun's lawyers threatened legal action. What is the latest on this?
Yeah, it looks like they've come to an agreement rebranding the show as Breaking the Musical with a tagline, a completely legal parody musical. Now, if you remember Rachel Gunn, aka Raygun, she was that Australian breakdancer whose performance at the Olympics didn't go so well. She was sort of mocked on social media pretty much all around the globe, especially for that kangaroo dance. Now, interestingly, this musical show cannot do Raygun's kangaroo dance because Gunn actually somehow owns it. Now, she's actually a university lecturer. She's since retired from competition. She says the fallout has left her devastated. Still, it seems like she's been kind of a pretty good sport about this whole thing, I'd say.
Well, Dave, looking at college football, the long-awaited playoffs start tonight with Indiana playing at Notre Dame. What do you make of this matchup?
Yeah, I like this matchup a lot. It's an in-state rivalry. It'll be played at historic Notre Dame Stadium. This is the best team Indiana has ever had in their 100-plus years of football. Their 11 wins are already a school record, but they are still 6.5-point underdogs to Notre Dame, which probably has the most storied football program of anyone in the country. But I think the Hoosiers here really have something to prove. A lot was made of the fact that their only game against a ranked team was against Ohio State, and Ohio State beat them by like 20-something points. Now, Indiana managed just 150 points or 150 yards of offense that day. Very low. I mean, they averaged on the season 3 times that. Now, meanwhile, Notre Dame is also a very good defensive team too. But these rivalry games can really be pretty volatile, I've found. I expect the Hoosiers are going to pull the upset tonight in South Bend. Now, that game starts at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, and it's on ABC and ESPN.
Well, Dave, as always, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you, Tiff.
And that's all for today's news. For round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.